I want to share with you a message from Mark chapter 10. I've read this passage and taught from this passage quite a lot over the course of the last 20 years nearly that I've served people. And I think it's worth going over, although this won't be repeat content, but it is an idea that's existed for a really long time. And I want to highlight this to you with a kind of a new frame, a new angle. And this is what's going on. Jesus is talking about the kingdom of God, and his followers get in an argument with one another. They start fussing and fighting. You ever had a family argument? Anybody have one today? Anyone anticipating one later that you're gearing up for? Like you're just ready to go. So that happens, and some of the most difficult people to deal with are those of us who follow Jesus. And Jesus had to deal with it in his life. One day, when I have enough courage and throw caution to the wind, I'm going to preach a series called Lord, Save Us from Your Followers. But until then, we'll have to deal with this for today. That's the context. They're getting in an argument. And I want you to see that as the backdrop because Jesus spins this on them in a way that will serve each and every one of us today. And here's what Mark says about this interaction. When the other 10 heard this conversation, they lost their tempers with James and John. And Jesus got them together to settle things down. Let me just pause right there. That's a good way to live in your mind, is that when things get stirred up, your assignment is, if you can, settle them down. A mentor of mine taught me this, that in conflict and in challenges, which we all experience, everyone brings two buckets to the conflict. In one bucket is water, and in the other bucket is gasoline. And however you respond to that conflict is going to either stifle the fire or inflame it. Some of us, we're only aware of the gasoline bucket. You need to understand you have the potential, and we're going to see what that is and how Jesus teaches this in his kingdom principles. He says this, which he does a lot, compare and contrast. You've observed how godless rulers throw their weight around. Pause. Anybody ever notice that today? How some people will just kind of try to throw their weight around and exert their dominance on a situation. He said, you've seen this. We've seen it. He said, and when people get a little power, you've seen how quickly it goes to their heads. So he's describing what we've all seen, and he says this, it's not going to be that way with you. So he says, you've watched this, now you be different. Do this differently. In fact, he says this prophetic, authoritative statement, it's not going to be this way with you. Don't copy this pattern in the world around you. He changes it, and this is what he says. Whoever wants to be great, which is a lot of us, we feel that desire, and it's not wrong. He says, whoever wants to be great, you must become a servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. That is what the Son of Man has done. Now he describes his life and says, copy this. Let this be your example to emulate. He came to serve, not to be served, and then to give away his life in exchange for many who are held hostage. I've read it out of this translation, which is the Message translation, many times, but for some reason, that last word jumped out at me. He says this. This is how I saw it this week. If you're really going to get into the position of servanthood, you have to view those that you're interacting with as hostages, as trapped, as stuck, as incapable of getting out of a jam that they're in. They're captivated or held captive by certain things in their life that they want to break free from. And he says, if you'll take on the role of serving others, what you'll do is you'll subvert, you'll undermine the human desire to be great and put your needs aside and serve others when you view them as trapped. I've titled today's message, "This is a rescue mission." The idea of servant leadership, which is what we're going to look at, I want you to look at it as a rescue mission. The first 18 months of Jessica's life passed without the world at large taking much notice. Then, on the morning of Wednesday, October 14th, 1987, that all changed when she suddenly became the most famous child in the United States, if not the entire world. Playing outside with 4 other children, Jessica had fallen into an 8-inch diameter well. She became trapped deep in its shaft. She became known as, from that point on, to many of us, as Baby Jessica. Baby Jessica remained trapped in the well 22 feet below the earth in a space of only 8 inches wide for the next 58 hours. Rescue crews attempted to save her life, and the entire nation watched transfixed as the drama played out live on television. Because she'd fallen so deep into the earth beneath layers of rock that had become harder than granite, and because the diameter of the well was so narrow, the rescue mission was extraordinarily difficult. Using a large rat hole rig, a machine normally used to plant telephone poles in the ground, rescue teams drilled a 30-inch wide, 29-foot deep hole parallel to the well. They then began the difficult process of drilling a horizontal tunnel between the 2 wells about 2 feet below where Baby Jessica was trapped. In the meantime, the rescue workers pumped oxygen into the well and attempted to maintain communication with Baby Jessica, who from time to time would moan, cry, wail, and even at times sing nursery rhymes. The entire rescue ordeal was covered live on television. This is way before, ladies and gentlemen, 24-hour news coverage. It's the late 80s. In fact, it was really the second major event in U.S. history captured live on television to watch it unfold, the first being the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger a year earlier. I remember where I was watching the Challenger liftoff because there was a teacher on board, and my classmates and I were in the lunchroom of North Elementary, and I remember that. The entire nation watched the Baby Jessica ordeal unfold around the clock as it became real to us. Finally, on the evening of October 16th, 1987, Baby Jessica was lifted out of the well to safety. The Pulitzer Prize winning photograph of her rescue was snapped by a man named Scott Shaw, and many of you will hold that image still in your mind. Many of you are hearing this story maybe for the very first time. I remember watching it live out. And the reason I titled today, "This is a Rescue Mission," is because none of those men and women who came to the scene to help Baby Jessica would have probably called themselves leaders. They were simply using their God-given talent and experience to rescue another human being and help a family in need. And oftentimes, I frame it this way for you because I think we're too busy looking for leaders when Jesus is saying, you don't need to have a certain mindset or temperament necessarily. You just have to have a heart to serve broken humanity with the gifts, skills, and talents. Listen carefully, that you already possess. Teachers, coaches, nurses, janitors, whatever you do right now. I'm not asking you to reinvent your life today. That's for another day. But for now, the things that you already do, normal, natural, that's how you serve the world around you. My concern about the rescue mission is that we've overcomplicated it and made it so that we have to be X, Y, or Z before we get involved and begin to serve. You can serve with your own abilities right here, right now, today. You can serve the world around you. It took nothing special except for me to be able to go to the grocery store, read a recipe, and follow the instructions to make a pie that's worth a lot of money. My concern is that we're filled with excuses rather than filled with compassion for the people around us. There are lots of reasons why we don't accept the mission. I bet that there were lots of people in that day with baby Jessica had all kinds of ideas of why not to do it. Well, who was watching the kid? Trying to place blame. If someone would have been watching the child, they would have never fallen into the well. My God, if this would have happened in 2023 with social media, there would have been more trolls than servant leaders, which is part of the problem. It's how we see the world. Like we're trying to place blame on why it happened instead of putting ourselves in their place. You've heard me say this many times, that the best way to summarize the idea of servant leadership is to live a life that's in their shoes, not in their face. We got to get that. Well, what about all the reasons why, preacher? And they're probably doing this, this, and this. Yeah, right. That's their task, not yours. Jesus said it's not supposed to be this way with you. Your assignment is to serve someone in need. That's the defining line of greatness in the kingdom, which is so contrary. And I know some of you are stuck right there right now. What if, or what about, or how's come, or they're doing this. Yeah. That's for another day. In the meantime, they're stuck in the well in a hostage situation, and they don't need all of your truth-telling at that moment. They need your compassion, and they need mine. Thank you. It isn't necessary for me to continue, but it certainly helps to have some support. The caregiver was at fault. It's too far from me. It's not affecting my life. Are reasons that we give. I worked, when I was much younger, I worked for a telecommunications company, and our assignment was to pull all of the telephone wire in the Lowe's new builds as they were building new Lowe's. And I got an assignment down in Valdosta, Georgia, and it was like a bazillion square feet of building. And there was a guy on the job. He would say this all the time because I did my very best to be neat and tidy and make sure you couldn't see wires hanging, and just kind of do the job the best of my ability. And this individual's phrase, you maybe have heard it before. I had never heard it as a young man. His phrase that he kept on repeating when it really didn't live up to the standard of excellence that was required of us. He would say, well, you can't see it from my house. Anybody ever heard that before? It would usually be followed with, it's time for me to go on my union break. Come on, somebody. Can't see it from my house. And there is a lot of that lives in the soul of humanity on these compassion issues, on these human issues. I'm not affected by it, but I think a group of people, what I think you see in that story is a group of people came from all over to help a family in need. They didn't do it because they thought, oh, if I do this, I'm going to get insta-famous. Let me give you some reasons why I think we don't accept the mission of servant leadership. And in my estimation, servant leadership is on the decline, but we can turn that around, and we are turning that around. One of the reasons why I think it's on the decline is because we have a lack of understanding. Servant leadership can be complex. It can be misunderstood. And some may wrongly perceive it as a weak leadership style, where the leader is subservient to the team, leading to reluctance in its adoption of an idea. So we don't understand it. We don't understand the power of it. Proverbs 10:13 says this, wisdom is found on the lips of the discerning, but a rod is for the back of the one who has no sense. Sometimes I think the frustration, I know. Sometimes the frustration is in our own lack of understanding, we create a rod for our own back. And we're the ones responsible. So what is servant leadership? It's where the primary goal of the people is to serve. In this approach, the leadership shares power, puts the needs of others first, and helps people develop and perform at its highest level possible. May I say something to you that might be controversial? And that is this, that we don't have a lot of examples of this in the world around us. All of the stuff that's newsworthy now, I'll tell you, is the opposite of this. Our political environment is saturated with power-hungry, self-centered individuals who've forgotten that their job is to serve the heart of broken humanity, not their pocketbooks and their own agendas. The political culture doesn't lend itself to produce servant leaders because politics is about making deals rather than making a difference. Why do I say that? Because when you're just in the deal industry, you'll compromise your values to please people. But when you serve, you know you do the hard job of making some people unhappy at times because it's not about them feeling good, it's about them being positioned to do good. Politicians in a lot of areas of leadership in our world, especially politicians, I've observed they're concerned about the next election. Servant leaders are more concerned about the next generation. So, lack of understanding, decline in servant leadership because of short-term focus. We're in a hurry. We're rapidly moving to try to get things done. We won't play the long game. We got to have the immediate, momentary gratification that comes from instant whatever. I don't want to belabor this point, but I do want it to be in your mind. The pie that I made took me a long time. Have you ever noticed anything that tastes good is worth the work and time that you put into it? I promise you this, that pie I made will not be beaten by some instant pudding knockoff. Do you know that you will never create anything in the microwave better than what you can produce in a crock pot? You won't. Our life has become so rapid and so fast that we are in a rapidly changing environment, and because of this, we focus more on the short-term results rather than long-term sustainability. Do you know how many get-rich-quick schemes are available now? Do you know how many lose the weight in 30 days things there are? You know how many pounds I've lost and refound? Come on, somebody, And I made a determination as kind of some of this was becoming clear to me. Revelation, in fact. Here's a key for me for life. Eat less, move more. It's not sexy, but it'll work. Slow, steady as she goes. As many of you already are aware, the turtle always wins the race. But we've been sold the rabbit. And so we're busy chasing the rabbit. The proverb says this, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. So as soon as you slow down and get long-term focused, changes begin to occur, but we're in a rush. Servant leaders may be seen as less relevant when you're in an environment where immediate performance is prioritized. Every corporation in America is prioritizing performance now. Get it done now. What's the rush? What's the hurry? Seriously, ask yourself the question. Once I hurry up and get this thing done and get it off the list, then what? What are you rushing to do? And I think that's getting in the way of our servant leadership. Have you all left or are you still here? Would it be helpful for me to hear you? Okay, you're here. Good. All right. Some of you are here. Thank you. The third reason is traditional structures. The verse that we read, I'm going to bring back up, is you've observed this. You've observed this traditional structure of rulers throwing their weight around and people get a little bit of power and it goes to their head. Many traditional structures are a diversion from servant leadership because it's a top-down decision-making system. And Jesus warns that there will be a temptation to resist servant leadership because it always prioritizes people over power. Another reason for decline is prophets over people. Jesus says this in Mark 8. He says, "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his own soul?" I just want to say this so that you can hear it. Your soul is more valuable than the bottom line. And that is the bottom line. If you compromise what you believe, your convictions, what you think, and how you want to behave, you're giving your soul in exchange for something. And watch this, you're forgetting about the rescue mission. And servant leadership matters to our mission. It matters to this hostage situation that people are in. And I want you to see why it's declining, but also what elements or characteristics are a part of servant leadership in my mind. 8 keys to greatness in the kingdom. And we'll make all of these graphics available to you on the app so you don't have to take them all down. You may not even be able to read all of them. Listening, empathy, healing, awareness. I put the heart with the ear because I think that hearing has to do more with your physical organ of your ear. It has less to do with your physical organ of your ear and more to do with that spiritual, indefinable, quiet place of what I'll call your heart. What happens on the inside of you when you interpret the data that you're getting? How do you hear it? And what do you do with it? Are you really listening to the heart cry of humanity? Empathy, healing, awareness, just being aware of what's going on. Foresight, stewardship, commitment to the growth of people, building community. I want to go back to the idea of social media, and I use social media, and I'm appreciative of social media. But as I began to think about my upbringing, this story brought me back to my upbringing. I grew up mainly in the 80s and early 90s. And I don't know how your childhood was, and I don't know what age bracket you're in, and I don't know what decade you would categorize your upbringing. But I have to tell you that I would not trade my upbringing for any other era ever. I just wouldn't. I hope you feel the same way. But I have a suspicion. If you grew up in the 2010s and 2020s, you might have a little bit of envy about some of our upbringings. Because the thing that was beautiful about my upbringing is it was free of the depth of other people's opinions. I wasn't told what mattered by other people and what the mob on the interwebs said. I was able to think through it and decide for myself. And this is what I want to say to every person, man, woman, child, younger, middle-aged, older, in the room and online. Listen, if it matters to you, it matters. And you don't need 150 likes to justify that it matters to you. All you need to decide is it matters to you. I wonder what it would be like if we spent more time trying to convince everyone of what matters to us, and instead we would exchange that time that we're using to persuade to actually just do the stuff and the work of serving and doing the stuff that matters to us and not having to get someone's permission for it. No one's given me permission to do what I do right now, except one person. In fact, there were a lot of people who said, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. That won't work for you. Thank God I didn't listen to them. And thank God you won't listen to those who really aren't knowing you. I grew up and I actually talked about it in between services, and my third grade teacher is here. I won't point her out, but I'm glad for everyone being here. I'm making sure I don't have any typos and so on and so forth. It's kind of coming up in my mind that there might be errors. Educators being in our services are one of the most scary things to me because grammar does matter to me because I think words matter. Anyway, in my upbringing, I had a paper route. And I had a nice paper route, and one of my good friends had a paper route, and I delivered newspaper for the Advocate, and he delivered the newspaper for the Columbus Dispatch. And in the hierarchy of paper boys, the Dispatch was here, and the Advocate was like way down here. Like if you were like a real paper boy or girl, you delivered the dispatch. It had to be out by like 7 a.m. every day. The Advocate had to be out, I think, by like 4. So I could do it after school. Oh, come on, somebody. It's like great news, right? And the Columbus Dispatch, you had to be a man to carry the Columbus Dispatch bag. I substituted, and the very first time I substituted, I had no foresight. And I loaded it up, and I just started emptying from the front. And unbeknownst to me, the front was getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and the back was the same weight as before, but the front was getting lighter, and it ended up choking me. Like I was like, why can't I breathe right now? What's going on? I had to remember that I had to take that big pack and swing it around and come around front. Anybody know what I'm talking about? No, 2 of you. Praise the Lord. That's sad. We rode our bikes until the streetlight lamps came on. There was a neighborhood near where I lived, and they were building new homes, and we went through the homes, and we played hide and go seek in the homes as they were being built, like after all the construction folks left. And the ones that were being built, they made great ramps for BMX. It was awesome. Like it was like the best thing ever. I actually could leave my house and have fun. There was life outside of the Nintendo in the basement. Right? Am I against any of those things? No. Play them, have fun. But there's stuff outside to do too. That was really old school, wasn't it? It felt really old school. Felt really old school Baptist. I don't know why, but it just felt that way to me. But being committed to growth and building community is what kind of led me down that path. Daniel, why don't you come and help me as I finish? I'm going to get out of your way. I'm over time. Let me finish with this story. One day as a small child, Thomas Edison came home from school and he gave a paper to his mother, and he said to her, "Mom, my teacher gave me this paper and said to me that I was to give it to you, and you were the only one to read it, and the only one allowed to read it. Will you tell me what it says?" Her eyes welled with tears as she read the letter out loud to her child. This is what it said. "Your son is a genius. This school is too small for him and doesn't have enough good teachers to train him. Please teach him yourself." Many years after Edison's mother passed away, he became, you all know, he became one of the greatest inventors of the century, maybe in human history. One day he was going through a closet and he found that folded letter that his old school had written to his mother that day. He opened it, and the message written on the inside of the letter said this: "Your son is mentally deficient. We cannot let him attend our school anymore. He's expelled today." Edison became emotional reading it and then wrote in his diary, "Thomas A. Edison was a mentally deficient child whose mother turned him into the genius of the century." May I say something to you before we go? Our culture has done an excellent job in canceling who we are at our core, and we should stop it. We should stop it. Servant leadership begins with self-discovery, and you never become a servant leader until you meet your authentic self. And I'm so glad that Thomas Edison's mother helped him meet his authentic self. And I hope that in the next weeks and days, and maybe already happened, that it would be one of the greatest honors of my life if some words that Jesus shared that I pass on to you will help you to find out who you are in your authentic self. Because on the other side of that is your servant leadership. It's when you'll do these things. You won't try to be anything. You just live in the residue of what God created you to do. I want you to realize this, that the world needs you. That's not just something that I say because I think you want to hear it. I say it to you because it's true. And here's why it's true. Because there's something God needed you to do. That's why he made you the way you are. And it's not done yet. And it needs you to do it. It needs you to finish it. Because God in his creative nature doesn't have any unnecessary redundancies. He just didn't make a carbon copy of you that just takes up space. He made the you that's seated in this room that will grow and develop and will become all that you become because you serve a need in the world around you. And the moment that you accept that is the moment you step into the greatness of the kingdom that God designed for you. But But as long as you're letting life happen to you and you're living, holding on to the opinions of others. And listen, this assumes this one truth, that you aren't the center. This isn't about you. It's not about me. It's about others and what you have in others that will help them. Not way off in the future. Today. Like right now it's there. You'll grow into other things and you'll be something to someone else later. But the young man that Larry met that day and shared his testimony with, he needed Larry that day. That was his assignment that day. And now listen, take it out of the spiritual context. Whatever they run into that day with you, are they getting your best? Are they getting the God-sized portion of you? Or are they getting a down, defeated, negative attitude? I'm going to use some words that might bother you, but you'll get over it because you've said and done the same, if not more. Life sucks today, and I just feel like a piece of garbage, and you just kind of give off that attitude. And when we do that, what we have to understand is we might feel that way, but we have to give way to something that's, and someone that's greater than us. Because inside of us is the one who understands the heart of broken humanity. How well are we serving them? I hope that I've made sense to you today. I'm going to invite you to stand to your feet with me because I'm going to get out of your way and let you go to lunch, and I hope you have it here. But I want to thank you in advance for accepting the mission. This is kind of my faith statement that I'm taking you in advance for accepting the mission. To leave out of here today, listen, please listen real carefully before we all move. To accept this mission, to not be someone else, but to be the authentic version that God designed you to be. That's what he's looking for. That's how you go forward in the kingdom. Someone says, well, what if the people you're talking to are a jerk? Well, we've all been that. We grow out of it, or we grow into it. We make it work to our benefit, whatever. But it doesn't keep us from trying to take one step forward today.
Have you ever felt like God doesn't hear you? That your voice hits the ceiling, like the heavens are closed? I've felt that way too. Hello, my name's Josh Pennington, and I would love to share with you how I navigated the dry seasons of life in my brand new book called When the Heavens Seem Closed. You can get this book anywhere that books are sold, online or at morelifechurch.com. I would love for you to plan a visit to worship with us any Sunday morning at 9 a.m. or 11 a.m. at More Life Church.